Hi, this is Randy from Friday's Golf, and welcome to Hard Boiled, the segment where I sit on an ugly couch and give you my first impression on new golf equipment in the market. Now, today's piece of equipment I'm particularly excited about because I've been waiting for it for a very long time. And no, it's not platform golf shoes. It's actually the new FlightScope Mevo. Now, for those of you who don't know what the FlightScope Mevo is, it's actually a pocket-sized launch monitor that works off of Doppler radar technology. No, it will not tell you the weather, but it will tell you all that launch monitor data goodness that we all crave. And launch monitors aren't new. We've had them around for years, but if you wanted accurate data, you had to pay for it. If you think about it, like the GC2, the GC Quad, once you factor in the software, you're talking like $10,000 to $15,000. TrackMan, forget about it. You're talking $20,000, $30,000 easy. Now, there are some other lower level launch monitors that are pretty accurate, but they're still right around that $2,000 barrier. Finally, one of these tech companies decided to move in the right direction, which is away from $30,000, and FlightScope priced the Mevo at $500, which I think is appropriate, considering that most of your consumers nowadays will spend $400 or $500 on a new driver. Why wouldn't you spend $500 on a decent launch monitor system if it gives you accurate data? But before I get into the review, I do want to give you my first impression of when I opened the Mevo up for the first time. Because when it arrived, my first thought was like, they forgot to ship the rest of it. Because the box is it's underwhelming. It's not very big. And when you open it up, I mean, the Mevo doesn't even fill the box all the way. You can see that, I mean, it's about the size of a credit card, the footprint is. Now, obviously, from the side, it's a little bit thicker. I would say about, I don't know, 2.5 times the width of a cell phone, but it easily would fit into your pocket. And when I opened it up, I was a little worried because I was like, oh no, it's so small and it's just going to be really cheap and cheesy. But this thing has some weight to it. It's actually quite heavy. Good weight, sign of reliability. Snatch. But I like the compactness of it because it's all about transport. The Mevo is all about being able to take it from one place to another easily. You could set this up at the golf course, on the driving range, and you don't have to worry about plugging stuff in, setting up a bunch of cords, or worried about it taking up a lot of space in your golf bag. It's got a little kickstand leg here on the back of it that, as you can see, so it props itself up nicely. And FlightScope did it right, I think, because they cut it down to the absolute minimum that you need it to be. So if they could fit all the technology to give me accurate data into this little box, we might have a winner here. The point of today's video is not only to determine the reliability and the accuracy of the data that comes off the FlightScope Mevo, but also to see if I can use it in a real-world setting. If this is something that I can trust to do reviews going forward, because if I don't have to spend $5,000 or $10,000, that would be great. Now, for those of you who have experience with launch monitors, you know that the software is just as important as the hardware. And when I saw the FlightScope Mevo, I'm like, yeah, it's $500, but how much is the software going to be? It's actually one of the coolest parts. It runs off of an app on your smartphone, and then they connect via Bluetooth, and that way you can transfer data from the Mevo to your smartphone, and it's absolutely free. Before I get into the testing, I do want to say that I handled this review like a true man would, meaning I read no manuals, I didn't do any research, I basically just opened up the box, downloaded the app, and was like, let's do this. The idea was I wanted to take the Mevo into Bobix and test it against the GC2, which is their backup launch monitor, because typically our hitting bay is just overwhelmed during the winter months, and we actually got a nice day. It was like 60 degrees outside, so I was going to take the GC2 out onto the range, which, I'd rather have tested it against the quad, but actually the nice weather worked out in my benefit. The good news is that the nice weather has made everyone want to go outside and hit balls in the range, so my fitting bay is completely vacant, so I have the GC Quad. So we're going to test the Mevo against the quad indoors in a controlled setting. I'm going to use a Bridgestone ball for every single shot that I hit. That is the Bridgestone Tour BX ball. Now, keep in mind, since we are hitting indoors, we do have to use the dot system. So each one of these Mevos comes with a couple sheets of dots that you have to put on the golf ball, put it on the tee, and face it in the opposite direction of the Mevo. So in the direction that you're hitting. That way when you hit the ball, that dot spins and then it detects it on the Mevo and then spits back spin rate. So we're going to test it. Right now I'm going to hit 10 shots with the driver, 10 shots with a 7-iron, and 10 shots with my wedge. Reverse that order, and we're going to see how it performs. You have a $500 unit against a $15,000 unit. Okay, real quickly before we get started, I want to show you how I set the Mevo up. Now, you do need to have it directly behind the hitting area, at least 4 feet back. This right now is 5 feet back. You set that up in the app to tell it exactly how far you have it away. That way it gives you a more accurate readout. So another thing that I thought was really cool, if I can angle it right and get it in focus, you see how that sight and that little pin up there at the front, use that like the sight of a gun, and you sight that up to look right down the barrel, right at the hitting area, right at the ball. Now that's important because if you don't have that aimed in the right direction, it will give you inaccurate data. I'm going to recalibrate this before I hit, so this isn't actually set up to where I'm going to hit from, but you want to make sure that that's pointed exactly where the ball will be taking off from.
We used to start each day with a revolution, end each night with another fight. Whether it was side by side or in opposition, let's go out and take the city tonight.
All right, we're back on the ugly couch, and before we get into the data, which there is a lot of data, I do want to revisit how I said I wanted to see how intuitive the Mevo was as far as opening up the app, turning on the Mevo, and wha-bam, see if it worked. I just want to let you know a few of the snags that I had that you may need to be aware of before you start collecting data. One, it is important on the top of the Mevo there where I showed you in the video, you do need to sight up the golf ball with your target with that little, I don't know, gun sight. That was weird. Second thing, you do need to select the club that you are testing, because I thought that was just for labeling, like just for your convenience, but I soon found out that you do actually have to have the driver selected if you're hitting driver, whatever iron you're hitting if you're hitting irons, and whatever wedge you're hitting if you're hitting wedges. And the reason being is because the Mevo is very small, that small footprint, so it kind of predetermines shot window. So for drivers, it's much lower than if you're hitting irons, than if you're hitting wedges. And if you don't pre-select what club you're hitting, most likely it's going to miss the shot. I had to read the manual, I'm sorry. Here's my man card. I also want to mention that I forgot to dot my golf clubs for the GC Quad, so I did not capture club head speed. But I got everything else. Now please keep in mind that we are capturing the exact same shot. So these are hit at the exact same time. We're not dependent on, oh, I hit this shot and I need to duplicate that to get the results. These were running simultaneously, so each shot that you see was directly represented from one unit to the other. To conserve as much time as humanly possible in this video, I'm just going to post the individual graphics for each monitor. That way, if you want to come back and examine the data in further detail, please feel free. Keep in mind that the columns are arranged differently in each set of data, so make sure you read the headlines there. But I'm just going to talk about the averages. Okay, so now when we take those averages and we put them right beside each other, you can see that we are not far off here. Average ball speed on the quad is 155.6. Average ball speed on the Mevo, 157.1. Launch angle on the quad is 13.5. Launch angle on the Mevo at 12.7. Average backspin on the quad, 26.92. Average backspin on the Mevo, 23.51. Average peak height for the quad is 38 yards. Average peak height for the Mevo, 37.2. Last, we have average carry yards on the quad. You're at 268. Average carry yards on the Mevo, 267.4. Once again, almost spot on. I was not expecting this at all. All right, moving on. We're going to go into the irons now. Once again, here is the iron data for each set of monitors. Please feel free to pause it if you want to examine it further, but we're just going to go into the averages. Taking a look at the averages side by side, we're not seeing a night and day difference here. Ball speed, we're within a mile an hour. Launch angle, we're within 2 degrees. Backspin, we're 50 RPMs off. When you talk about 6,000 RPMs, that's not a huge error there. And carry distance is probably the most drastic here. For some reason, the Mevo read iron shots seemingly to go a little bit farther for whatever reason. You guys, like I said, can dissect the data and see if you can find the anomaly. All right, last, the sand wedge data for each monitor. Like I said, feel free to pause it, but we're just going to go into the averages. For this last head-to-head matchup, we're looking pretty good. That average ball speed is within a mile an hour. Average launch angle is within a degree. Average backspin is about 700 RPMs off. And I think I know why. If you take a look back at shot 6 on the Mevo, the spin rate is way low for a full swing sand wedge for me. So I think it might have missed the spin rate on there, and that's why the spin rate's so low. And if you take a look at the average carry distance, we're almost spot on there. We're 0.3 yards difference. I can't say conclusively, but hitting 30 shots, one right after another, and the Mevo keeping right up with the GC Quad. No, the numbers weren't identical, but they were close. And when you're talking about $14,500 difference between the two price-wise, I think Mevo gives you your money's worth. Alright, the next part of the video I did not plan on doing. I didn't think that I would get 2 nice days in a row, but I did, so let's go to the course. Alright, so I'm out here at Riverbend Golf Course. I overestimated the niceness of the weather. It is freezing cold outside, but the good news is that I'm only wearing a sweater, which is consistent to what I wore in the inside testing, so there shouldn't be any mix-up in the data there. But I did bring the driver with me, the wedge, the 7-iron. We're going to test them out here on the course, get real-world numbers, and compare the spin rates, launch angle, ball speed to see if it's similar to what we saw indoors. So I'm going to set the Mevo up here, play a couple holes, and hopefully give you guys some interesting data. Alright, so one last test before we head back to the ugly couch. The Mevo has a setting for pitching, under 20 yards. So I set up a little short game area here. It's 19 yards of the flag stick. I'm going to hit a couple shots here, record some data, and after this I'll see you back at the ugly couch.
Come on down, bring your friends and family around. Stop to see the show and how it's done. Come out by the next round. Welcome to Colossal Town.
Alright, so I'm back on the ugly couch for the final time. I'm going to do a head-to-head between the Mevo indoor and outdoor numbers. So let's just jump right into it. So the top ones there, the average outdoor numbers, you have 270.8 carry distance, where on the indoor number, 267.4. Average club speed, you got 105.1 and 107.1. Sounds like a radio station. Ball speed average, 157.2 and 157.1. Average spin rate, 2480 and 2351. Average launch angle is at 16.1 and 12.7. Average height at 47.4 and 37.2. Numbers still look good. I mean, you got to take into consideration that I'm giving you completely new data entry here, so my consistency or lack thereof in my swing is going to skew the numbers, I think, more than the unit itself. But let's go ahead and take a look at the numbers on the outdoor 7-iron shots. I do want to point out that if you look under shot name, it starts at shot 2. The reason you don't see shot 1 is because I forgot to, as I mentioned before, select the 7-iron. I was still on the driver setting, so it completely missed the spin rate. So I reset it back to the 7-iron setting, and we were good to go. When we take a look at those numbers side by side against the indoor numbers, we are, once again, not far off. You're talking about less than 3 yards in carry distance difference. Clubhead speed is almost spot on. Ball speed is almost spot on. But look at that spin rate. That's a 14 RPM difference on an average of 3 shots. Average launch angle within 0.3 degrees. Average height, you're within half a yard. We're getting close, I promise. Let's take a look at the sand wedge shots outdoors. All right, as we stack the data, you can see some discrepancies. On the first shot here that carried 125.2, I bladed that. The second shot that carried 104.1, I hit that a little fat. And then the third shot that I hit at 108.6, that was a normal sand wedge shot. So when we take that into consideration, that last shot there was probably a more accurate representation of how I hit the shots indoors, considering mats, whether you want to admit it or not, they help us hit wedges and irons more consistently, where when you're out in mushy grass, if you catch one a little heavy, it's going to be real heavy. Now, before I praise the Mevo too much, I do want to go over what I saw in the pitch setting, which are shots under 20 yards, so I'm going to go ahead and go over that data with you now. I did use my lob wedge. I was 19 yards away from the target, as I stated in the video. My average carry distance was at 17.4. My average ball speed was at 29.3. Average spin rate was at 68.70. I think not. Typically, on a shot like that, 4,400 RPMs a spin would probably be a more accurate average. Something went wrong there. It didn't capture the spin correctly. I actually hit more shots that I didn't show in the video, and I just couldn't get it to read an even close to appropriate number. Whew. Okay, so final thoughts and conclusion on the FlightScope Mevo. If you couldn't tell from me drooling on my data, I was impressed by it. I mean, when you think about the size of it and the cost of it, I mean, yeah, there were some inaccuracies, but for $500, this is a great launch monitor. It's lightweight, it's portable, the battery lasts forever, it's durable, it's small, you can set it up with ease, it's intuitive, the app works great. I don't have a lot to nitpick about the Mevo considering the price. I mean, are there things wrong with it? Absolutely. Are there things that I wish they would have changed or will change in the future? Absolutely. And I'll go over those in just a second. But overall, I think it's a winner. Now, some of the drawbacks of the FlightScope Mevo, and I think are important, is if this is something that you plan to take with you to the range, I don't think it's going to do what you need it to do. For one thing, you really need to dot each golf ball with those little aluminum circles if you're going to get accurate spin rate numbers. And I just don't see people dotting range balls and just hitting them out there and never being able to get them back. And plus, you might piss off the range because they're going to be washing those balls, and it's probably going to clog up their machine because all those stickers floating around in there. Another thing I don't like about it is how dependent it is on the positioning behind the ball. When you have to have it down to the inch how far it is away, and you have to have it sight lined in. I mean, maybe it doesn't have to be perfect, but I'm anal retentive. It's like, if I'm 6'1" away, I want to make sure I put 6'1" away into the app there. When I'm out in the course and I'm playing around, maybe there's some people behind me, but I want to capture some data. It's like I don't want to be laying on the ground, sighting up my ball to make sure this thing is set up properly. I didn't like the way you had to select what club you were hitting in order for it to capture the shot. So if you went from your driver to your sand wedge, it was probably going to miss it because it was looking in a totally different area for the ball to travel through. I just thought that was an inconvenience, and I mean, that's nitpicking. Alright, so that wraps it up. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode of Hard Boiled. I'm sorry that it was so packed with data, but I didn't really see any way around that. So hopefully you enjoyed the content. Please thumbs up the video, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys next time.